Hello everyone, welcome to the section Object-Oriented Programming through Java. Myself Navya, I am an assistant professor from the department of CSIT in MLR Institutions of Technology. Today we are going to discuss exception handling. Here in this session, you are going to learn what is an exception, what are the reasons for exceptions as well as types of exceptions. Coming to exceptions. Before going to the exceptions, you have to know what is an error. So, what is mean by an errors? Errors are nothing but for every programming languages you will have certain syntaxes as well as certain criteria of how you have to write a simple program. So, you will have some rules to write a program and how you will have some syntaxes to write the program. So, if you miss any syntax of the for that program, or if you miss some logic went wrong, so those are called as some errors. So, there are two types of errors we already know. One is compilation errors and the runtime errors. Compilation errors are the errors that occurs at the time of compilation. At the time of compilation of the code, you will get compilation errors. Why you will get the compilation errors? If you miss any semicolon or the parenthesis, or if you are missing some statement, like if you are writing printf, instead of printf you are writing only println, if you are writing print, so like that. So, which is not there in this. If I miss print n in a print, like that. As well as if you miss some double quotation somewhere, like that, these type of errors, if you are missing any, if your code doesn't meet or which will not follow which does not reach us the syntaxes, which is exactly which does not obey the rules of the programming language, then the compilation error occurs. When coming to runtime errors are the errors if you are, for example, if I am taking a for loop for I equals to 0, I should be less than or equals to 0 and I should be minus. What happens here? First, for the very first time I equals to 0, I less than or equals to 0, condition true, isn't it? Now, it will print something. I am printing some star. And it will print some star. I will become minus 1. Minus 1 is less than 0. It will print another star. Minus 2, minus 3, minus 3. So, it will go, there is a no condition, it's an invalid condition. Okay, it's an invalid condition. But the syntax wise it was correct. So, the compilation will be happen. At the time of execution, it will leads to an infinity or the infinity lines of code output. So, due to this, the runtime will occur, that there is no termination of that particular loop. So, it will go to infinity loop and it will print print the stars for n number of times. So, it won't stop anywhere. So, this type of errors are called as runtime errors. Then, what is an exception? Exception is an abnormal situation that arises during execution of the program. So, while executing the program, if any problem occurs, then it is said to be exception. So, what is an exception? An abnormal situation that is arise during the program execution. In simple words, you can say exception is a problem that arises at the time of program execution. Okay, so when an exception occurs, what happens? The program, it disrupts the program execution flow as well as the program execution will get terminated and the system generates an error. So, we use this exception handling concept mechanism to avoid that particular abnormal situation of program execution. Okay, so here we can say Java is an robust programming language. What is mean by robust? Strong. Robust programming language. Why you can call a robust programming language? Due to two reasons. One is memory allocation, or it can say garbage collection. As well as the second one is exception handling mechanism. So these are the two features. By these two features, Java is said to be a robust programming language. So it has a heavy garbage collector. Whenever you allocate memory to particular variable, that would be deallocated automatically if you does not give any instructions that directly or automatically at the time after the execution of the program, the memory will be deallocated automatically. So you can say Java is a rich in garbage collections. It automatically collects the allocated memory will be deallocated automatically, as well as you can say by this the memory allocation. So there will be no space management will get into the trouble. And coming to exception handling. So exception handling mechanism we are seeing now. So Java has a very powerful and rich, efficient exception handling mechanism with large number of built-in classes to handle most of the exceptions automatically. Most of the exceptions will be handled automatically by Java itself. Okay, so there are many built-in classes which is used to handle exception handling. So if any abnormal situation occurs while you are running a program, while the execution of the program, that would be caught, the exceptions would be caught by the Java API, and it would be directly, you will get an error message and it won't go over the next level of program. So there will be no program. So here you are the class hierarchy to support exception mechanism. So this is a class. Java.lang is a package. The sub packages are object and throwable. Throwable package again divided into two. One is the exception and another is errors. So exceptions, you are having n number of exceptions. First one is IO exceptions, which will go with input output streams. Class not found exceptions, if any classes are not found or any classes related exceptions will handled by class not found exceptions, and SQL, any SQL related queries. So that would be handled by SQL exceptions and runtime exceptions. There are n number of runtime exceptions, arithmetic exceptions, null pointer exceptions, number format exceptions, index out of bounds exceptions, and array index out of bounds exceptions, string index out of bounds exceptions. So these are the list of exceptions. There are many number of exceptions are there which are not listed here. Now errors. So you can have virtual machine error, out of memory error, stack overflow error. These are the system related errors that could be have while compilation. Next, what are the reasons for exception occurrences? There are several reasons that leads to occurrence of exceptions. Few of them are this. So when you are trying to open a file that does not exist, so it may leads to an exception. I am writing a program, in that I has given some path. Path is correct. So it just take the path. While compilation, it won't know whether it was there or not, isn't it? So at the time of runtime only, if you are trying to open which does not exist the file, so then the exception occurs. And if an user enters invalid input data, that may lead to exception. Okay, and when a network connection has lost during the program execution, that may lead to exceptions. And when you are trying to access a memory beyond the allocated range, so you are allocated only 5 bits of data. If you want to allocate, if you are trying to access more than 5 bits, then the exception occurs. And the next one, the physical device problems may also lead to an exception. So these are some of the reasons for the exceptions. Coming to types of exceptions. There are two types of exceptions. One is checked exceptions. An exception that is checked by the compiler at the time of compilation is known as checked exceptions. Coming to unchecked exceptions. Unchecked exceptions are the exceptions that cannot be caught by the compiler but occurs at the time of program execution. So, those are unchecked exceptions. Exceptions caught at the time of compilation, those are called as checked exceptions, whereas the exceptions that occurs at the time of runtime which cannot be caught at the compilation time, those types of exceptions are called as unchecked exceptions. So, coming to checked exceptions, which we have seen So, an exception is the checked that is checked by the compiler during compilation process to confirm whether the exception is handled by the programming or not. If it is not, the compiler displays a compilation errors using built-in classes. So, at the time of compilation, it will check whether the programmer, the developer is handling a particular exception or not. If the program is not handling exceptions, then it will directly give you the compilation errors using built-in classes. The checked exceptions are generally caused by faults outside of the code itself, by missing resources or networking errors or problem with threads come into the mind. So, these are the exceptions which are commonly found. Okay. So, the checked exceptions are also called as compilation exceptions, compile time exceptions, and few of the checked exceptions are input output exception. So, if you have input output stream related exceptions, then that comes under input output exceptions. Next, file not found exceptions. If you are giving a path, the file is not found, so then the exception is file not found exception, class not found exception. And if you are writing a class name, if you are saving, for example, if I can say, if I am having a class C1 is my class, and class C2 which consists of public static void main, I have saved this particular file with c1.java. Okay. So, at the time of compilation, I am writing java space c1.java. At the time of execution, I am writing java space c1.java. So, you will get the class not found exception, because you has to save it with c2.java actually, or while executing you has to execute the c2 class. So, in such conditions the exception occurs, then you has to write, then it will show you the class not found exception. SQL exceptions, if you are having any query related SQL queries at the time of JDBC connections, if you are written any SQL queries wrong, then you will get under SQL exception. Next, data access exceptions, if you are if the allocated memory you are trying to access more than the allocated memory, then you will get the data access exception. Instantiation exception, if I am writing an interface and I am going to instantiate an interface, then you will get the instantiation exceptions. And unknown host exceptions, this is related to servlets. So, if you are trying to access unknown host, then unknown host exceptions will be happen. So, in this exception class hierarchy, the checked exception classes are the direct children of the exception class. Checked exceptions are the direct children of the exception classes. Okay. So, this was a simple example program. This is java.io.star. I am taking file, so I am going with the stream, so IO. So, checked exceptions. In this, I am taking a file. FFS is an object for the file, and new, this is my path. Okay. So, I am writing file reader is used to read some file. If this file is not found, the exception would be happen. So, and it will print the exceptions. Let us see this. So, this is my program. Checked exceptions, I am giving this and which is not available. File not found, I has to get the file not found exception, isn't it? Java C. Checked exceptions dot Java. Java. So see here, file not found exceptions I have got. This is my exception. I have got file not found exceptions. What is this exception? See, it has given the path and the system cannot find the path specified, which is the particular file is not available. So, what is this exception? File not found exception. This is how the exceptions will give the message. So, we didn't write this message here, but it has got the message. This is how the exception could be handled in Java. Coming to unchecked exceptions. So, unchecked exceptions are the exceptions occurs at the time of program execution. These exceptions are not caught by the compiler at the time of compilation. Okay. So, while you are executing the program, at the time of that, you will get the exceptions. So, exceptions, unchecked exceptions are generally due to bugs such as logic errors, improper use of resources, etc. So, these are also called as, so you will have few built-in classes used to handle unchecked exceptions. One is arithmetic exceptions, null pointer exceptions, number format exception, array index out of bounds exception, string index out of bounds exception. So, this is, so what is arithmetic exception? For example, if I declare n1, n2, I am doing division. So, I am asking the user to enter two values. He has entered n1 value is some 5 and n2 value he has given some 0. So, in that n1 by n2, based on the user values only, we are going to do the division, isn't it? So, whenever I got this, this will lead to infinity, which is not correct. Such type of exceptions are called as arithmetic exceptions. Null pointer exceptions. If I am creating int some string s equals to some null, okay, and I am trying to s dot length. I am trying to find the length of that string. So, which is an exception? I have written that as null and I am asking for the length of the null. So, what is the length of that string? Next, number format exceptions is nothing but if, for example, if I has created an integer value and that I was to convert it into some string. So, that such type of exceptions are number format exceptions. Array index out of bounds exceptions are nothing but simply I am creating int a of 5, okay, and I have given values 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and I am writing a of 6 equals to some 7. So, I have given only 5 values, I have declared only 5 values, but I am trying to access which is not available. So, such type of exceptions are array index out of bounds exceptions. In the way same as this string index out of bounds exception, if I am creating a string with 5 and I am giving some India and if I am going with some like this. So, if I am trying to access which is not having, then the exception is said to be string index out of bounds exception. So, here in the exception class hierarchy, the unchecked exceptions classes are the children of runtime exception class. In the runtime exception class, which is a child class of exception class, which is a child class of exception class, you will have all these exceptions. So, these are also called as runtime exceptions. Unchecked exceptions are called as runtime exceptions. And this is an example program. See here, I am writing an example program. I am taking a list. Okay, array of list which consists of 5 values 10, 20, 30 and 40, 50. Now, I am trying to access list of 6 which is not available actually. So, I will get array index out of bounds exceptions. And next, string message equals to null and I am trying to print the message dot length, which is a null pointer exception. And next, string ABC, I am converting this into this string into numbers, integer I. So, you will get the number format exceptions. Let us see this example program here. Okay, this is an example program. Java C. Okay, so no compilation errors are not there. Now, while executing, the first one I will get. See here, exception in thread main Java. So, index out of bounds, index 6 out of bounds the for length 5. As we have given here, length is 5. It was holding only 5 values, but I am trying to access the 6th value, which is an exception. Okay. So, first this exception would happen and it will went for the exception and it will terminate it. So, it does not execute the remaining program. Okay. Now, I kept that in a comments and now see here. In the exception in thread main Java dot null pointer exception. This is an array index out of bounds we have seen here, right? So, here null pointer exception cannot invoke string dot length because local 1 is null. So, you have initialized that one into null, but still you are asking for the length of the string. So, which is an exception. So, it's an unchecked exception at main. So, directly it got null pointer exception. Now, another exception, let us see another exception, which is number format exception. Okay. Here, it's an exception in thread main java.lang number format exception. For input string ABC at Java, number format exception for input string number format exception has occurred. So, where you are trying to change that into an integer, which is impossible, right? So, it's an unchecked exception. So, you have got this exception. This is how the exceptions would be handled in Java automatically. Okay. So, in today's session, what we have learned? First, what is an exception? An abnormal situation at the time of runtime, the problem could be terminated. So, such type of situation or the problem is known as an exception. And we have seen what are the reasons that arise for an exception. Reasons for exceptions. So, if you are giving a file which is not existing, or instead of one particular one data, if you have given another data, that was one reason. And if you has given some zeros, so such type of errors, or if the network is not there, so some that physical problem, physical resources, these all comes under exceptions, which leads to an exception. And next we have seen types of exceptions. How many types of exceptions are there? 2 types of exceptions. Checked exceptions and unchecked exceptions. Checked exceptions are also called as compile time exceptions, and unchecked exceptions are also called as runtime exceptions. We have seen what comes under checked exceptions, what comes under unchecked exceptions, and we have seen an example programs for both. So, this is what we have learnt in this session, and in next session we are going to handle these exceptions manually, how the developer can handle the exceptions manually, you can know. So, thank you for the session.